Hey friends, welcome. My name is Scott Tidwell, and I want to talk nerdy to you. So as you can tell, I'm a big nerd, and you can see I got some real nerdy books right behind me here. Got some Dungeons and Dragons books, topic of the video today. So if you like what I've got to say, hit that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below, tell me what you liked, tell me what you didn't like, tell me what I should talk about next. Okay, let's get into it. Hands down, of all of the official Dungeons and Dragons campaign settings that have ever been published, my favorite above them all is Dark Sun. You can see it right behind me here. I've got the original box set, one of the original books. Absolutely love Dark Sun. It was sold in 1991 when it first came out as a post-apocalyptic Dungeons and Dragons setting. All right. And at the time, one of the big post-apocalyptic media franchises was Mad Max. Mad Max set in the Australian outback after some kind of nuclear war or apocalypse, and Max, the dude, is fighting a road war with all of these guys. They're fighting over scarce resources. They're fighting over scarce oil. In the later books, the world is like a desert, and it's fallen apart, and it's messed up. You can see all of that in Dark Sun. Okay, but it's in a sort of fantasy setting, and it's got some of the tropes of Dungeons & Dragons still. For example, it's got a lot of the fantasy races. You've got the elves, you've got the dwarves, you've got the halflings, you've got a dragon, you've got wizards, you've got clerics, you've got a lot of the tropes from regular D&D. But they're all kind of twisted and changed in Dark Sun a little bit. And the source of many of those changes, the theme that really drives a lot of what's going on, is this post-apocalyptic theme. So let's talk about that a little bit. So Dark Sun is a blasted desert world. The oceans have evaporated. The plant life has almost completely died out. Most of the animal life has disappeared, and what remains behind has become sort of brutal and deadly and dangerous as it's evolved and adapted to the intense struggle of survival that is life in the Dark Sun. Okay? What happened to the world? It began as something like a Tolkien-esque or normal fantasy type setting. What Dark Sun was, what the society was like before the apocalypse, is never really articulated very well. There's some little hints and some little things, but there was a great civilization. There was a great green age. Things were very much like a traditional Dungeons & Dragons fantasy setting. But something happened. Now, to understand what happened, you've got to understand one of the most unique things about the Dark Sun setting, and it's the way that arcane magic works. Now, divine magic, clerical magic, it works roughly the same as in the regular Dungeons & Dragons campaign setting. Priests pray, they conduct rituals, druids draw their power from spirits of the land and from nature, but arcane magic is extremely different. And I think the fundamental difference between arcane magic in the Dark Sun campaign setting and arcane magic in a regular D&D campaign setting is that it's super important where the energy that fuels a magical spell comes from. In regular D&D, we're told that magic is an art form that wields power through arcane syllables and mysterious gestures. Wizards are scholars and experimenters who study ancient texts to learn the incantations, to learn the material components and ingredients, and to learn the mysterious gestures used to cast these spells. But we're never really told where the energy to fuel these effects come from. A fireball creates a big explosion of flame, right? Well, where does the energy to fuel that flame come from? We're not really told. In a regular D&D, it doesn't matter, but in Dark Sun, it does. The key to arcane magic in Dark Sun is that the energy to fuel a wizard's spells has to come from living things in the environment. Mostly, that means wizards in Dark Sun draw the energy for their spells from the plant life around them. Now, of course, animals have a great deal of energy in them as well, but only the most powerful and evil of wizards are able to draw the energy from living animals, sentient humanoids, etc. Most wizards draw the energy from their spells from the plant life around them. Okay. Now, there are two ways that a wizard can go about this, right? A wizard can be sort of environmentally conscious and careful and realize that wanton use of arcane magic can destroy the plant life around them and cause serious damage to the environment. Those wizards that are careful to draw their energy a little bit more slowly, to maybe put a little bit of it back, to nurture and protect the environment around them, they are called preservers. And of course, in a dark fantasy setting like Dark Sun, the preservers are by far the minority. The vast majority of wizards are called defilers, and they don't care what happens to the living environment around them. They don't care if the plants around them, the grasses, the trees, the shrubberies that fuel their spells, they don't care if those plants wither and die. And so the defiler, instead of being careful, is reckless. Instead of being slow, the defiler is fast, and the defiler consumes all of the living energy around him, leaving behind gray ash and a barren, sterile desert where nothing will grow for a generation. So already you can see what happened to the world. Why is the world a burnt and blasted desert? From the reckless and unchecked use of arcane magic destroying the environment. Now, that's the setup. It's not just that over the course of tens, hundreds, thousands of years, wizards just simply used up all of the plant life around them. That's not exactly what happened. There was an apocalypse, a great cataclysm. Now, in the setting, especially as it was originally conceived, it's not really made clear what the apocalypse was. There are some rumors that in the dim days of antiquity, thousands of years ago, there was a great war that raged across the face of the world. It's hinted that the war was started by defilers and that it was won by defilers. And over the course of the war, they just destroyed the environment of the planet, defiling, consuming all of the plant life around them in order to fuel their war machine. And after however long this great war raged, not only did it deal nearly a death blow to the civilization that existed before, but it ruined the natural environment, leaving behind the great desert. But of course, that's not all. Now, if that was all that happened, it would still be pretty awful, and Dark Sun would be pretty bad. But the defilers did something else. And again, exactly how it happened, exactly what the purpose of it was, and who did it is left a little mysterious in the original texts of the Dark Sun campaign setting. The most powerful defilers involved in the war needed a new source of power. And since they had defiled the living environment of the planet to the point where there was very little left for them to consume, they had to look elsewhere. And so, instead of gathering the energy for their final spells from the living environment around them, they turned to the source of life itself, the sun, and they defiled it. Whatever it was they did, and whatever the purpose of their defiling was, they turned the yellow, life-giving star into a desiccating and destructive red giant. Hence the name of the setting, The Dark Sun. It's a post-apocalyptic dark fantasy setting on a desert world that orbits a red giant. Now, in some of the later literature, some of the later texts for Dark Sun, they reveal more of the backstory about what happened in the ancient war, who started it, why they defiled the sun. I kind of liked how it was left mysterious in the original literature. I think that's pretty cool. I enjoyed kind of not knowing very much and having it just be this kind of dim mystery question from the ancient days. So I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that for you guys. Interestingly enough, the Dark Sun campaign setting also features a few themes from a related genre of literature. So related to the post-apocalyptic genre is what's sometimes called the Dying Earth genre. Gary Gygax was into Jack Vance's series, The Dying Earth, which is where the genre gets its name from. But these themes, you can find these in a lot of other places. For example, Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom novels set on Mars. The John Carter novels that Disney made the movie John Carter of Mars out of, right? These also feature the Dying Earth themes. So what is the Dying Earth genre? Instead of a great apocalypse, a single cataclysmic event destroying society, the Dying Earth genre features ancient societies that have kind of slowly and steadily marched down the path of entropy and decadence and decay. So there hasn't been a sharp break in which anything was destroyed or ruined, but just instead, over a long period of time, these civilizations have kind of not only lost their mojo, but they've exhausted the resources of their planet. They've exhausted their own creativity, the will of their people. Decadence reigns. People care about drugs. People care about indulging all of their whims, their darkest fantasies, and their most forbidden desires. People don't care anymore about defending their families or defending their nation or conducting scientific research. People just want to party and forget themselves. That's the kind of decadence that we're talking about. Well, of course, there are elements of that in the Dark Sun setting as well, because even though there was this great cataclysm in the past that destroyed the environment and turned the sun into a red giant, the ancient civilization wasn't just completely wiped out, and in fact, elements of it survived. In the aftermath of the war, the people that remained, the survivors, slowly retreated back to a few giant city-states that were situated on top of remaining sources of water and remaining sources of greenery. These are the famous city-states of the Dark Sun setting. And those city-states have been populated for several millennia since the end of the war. These cities experienced the long, slow march down the road of entropy, becoming decadent, becoming violent, sort of becoming dark and evil places that you really wouldn't want to visit. And of course, the people in Dark Sun don't really want to visit the city-states either, but it's better than the alternative, dwelling out in the desert where there's no water, there's no food, the environment is extremely dangerous. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Resources are extremely scarce. Like, the desert in Dark Sun is not where you want to be. And so people have retreated to these great city-states and have put up with all of the darkness and decadence there because it's the best alternative. Now, I touched briefly on another theme just now, and it's a theme from both the Dying Earth genre and post-apocalyptic fiction, and it's the scarcity of resources, okay? So just think about Mad Max, right? Gasoline is extremely valuable, and then everybody needs fuel for their bikes and for their cars and so on. And this idea pops up in a lot of genres and literature adjacent to this idea. I remember in one of Stephen King's gunslinger novels, I think it was Wolves of the Calla, but I could be wrong about that. Let me know in the comments if you remember exactly which one it was. There's some petty dictator of a town, but he's got himself some tanks from before the world moved on. We're talking like M1 Abrams or something like this, like pretty advanced technology that he's got. He wants to use them against his enemies, but he doesn't have any fuel. And so one of the themes, one of the plot points of the book was this guy trying to get his hands on oil or gas or diesel or something so he could operate his fleet of tanks, right? So this is kind of a theme in this literature. And of course, Dark Sun has this going on as well. But of course, since we're in a fantasy setting, right, it can't be oil and gasoline that is the scarce resource that everybody wants. So in Dark Sun, very interestingly, the scarce resource is metal. Iron, bronze, gold, silver, all of these things were once abundant in the world, but over millennia of mining them, smelting them, using them, fighting wars, all of the easily accessible mineral wealth has been used up. And so now iron, bronze, steel, these materials for making weapons are incredibly rare and precious. It's sometimes said that a king of one of the great city-states can choose between buying a full suit of steel plate mail armor or making a major addition to his city walls. This is the kind of scarcity and preciousness that we're talking about. And of course, since gold and silver are incredibly rare and precious, adventurers don't find hordes of gold and silver coins lying around. Instead, most money in the Dark Sun campaign setting consists of, they're called ceramic pieces. They're sort of like clay, coin, token kind of things that harken back to ancient Mesopotamian and Sumerian monetary systems. So there we have it. There's the first major thing I wanted to talk about with the Dark Sun campaign setting, right? The post-apocalyptic, dying Earth sort of themes of the setting, which I love. I just think they're so cool. Dark Sun is kind of like Mad Max meets John Carter of Mars with a dash of Lord of the Rings and The Walking Dead thrown in there. Super cool. There's no other Dungeons and Dragons campaign setting quite like it.